Good evening, my fellow Expanse fans. James Hancock here, back to review the Season 3 finale of The Expanse. While it might be sad that the story is drawn to a close for the time being, it's hard to imagine a more appropriate send-off for the show while we wait to see what Alcon Entertainment and Amazon are going to do with the show moving forward. Also, I need to thank many of the commenters on last week's video because I had no idea they were going to do a double header for the season finale. I thought tonight was episode 12 and I thought next week was season 13. Makes total sense with July 4th weekend why they wanted to put both this week, but I would have been totally screwed doing a review of episode 12 without even realizing what I was missing. So for all the people out there who gave me an appropriate heads up, I thank you. Also, I'm starting to realize that most of the people commenting on my reviews of The Expanse are far smarter than I. A lot of people were pointing out in my last video how I misinterpreted the explosion aboard Naomi's ship in the last episode. It wasn't an explosion at all. In zero gravity, fire looks like those little bubbles. And I guess I'm the only person on the internet who's never seen fire in zero gravity, but a lot of people were pointing out my errors. So between this season and the next, I promise at a bare minimum that I will read like a physics for dummies book or something to that effect, because it's been about 23 years since the last time I took a physics course. There's so much that I want to say about these two episodes and why they worked so well. But before I get to any of that, I just have to say, this was one of those rare situations where for the last 20 or 30 minutes, I was on my feet, like chewing the edge of the carpet, just completely freaking out. There was even one moment where a character made a gesture of self-sacrifice that almost made me start crying. I mean, I was completely exhilarated by the last 20 or 30 minutes of episode 13. But what I liked most of all is how it depicted a conflict where nearly every single person involved thought they were doing the right thing. And I think a lot of times we tend to think of conflict in very simple-minded terms in terms of good versus evil. And part of the brilliance of this show, especially because it has 3 different factions as opposed to just 2, is that it allows a more detailed, nuanced look at conflict and what drives people, and how oftentimes due to misinformation, fear, ignorance, even people who think they're doing the right thing can actually be doing terrible harm to the very same people that they're trying to protect. And that obviously flows from the pen of the 2 writers who operate under the name James S.A. Corey, the guys behind this series of books that has inspired the show. But I think when it comes to science fiction, fantasy, your typical escapist entertainment, more often than not, we're given relatively simplistic conflicts, like simple morality tales that are very easy to digest. And what I loved about this finale is how oftentimes I would see characters that I love and respect and admire doing things that could potentially bring about the deaths of everyone they care about, including every single person in our solar system. This was a conflict of truly cosmic scope, and I was just absolutely riveted. And best of all, it showed that no matter how murderous and horrible and just completely sociopathic a character might be, in the world of The Expanse, even the most villainous cretin is not beyond redemption. Because as we see, the one character who's been an outright villain for the entire second half of Season 3, it's only due to her actions that the complete and total genocide of the human race was brought to an end. So as you can tell from the tone of my voice, I thoroughly enjoyed tonight's doubleheader. It was an absolute blast. And you don't have to worry about me making any spoilers about what's to come because I'm only halfway through Cibola Burn, the 4th book in the series. And luckily I've got some time between Season 3 and Season 4 to get well ahead of where the show is. But apart from the basic premise of what's to come, I'm as much in the dark moving forward as the majority of the viewers out there. But we are looking at a brave new frontier for the show. We're looking at a massive reboot of the entire status quo. But as exciting as it is seeing the human race on the verge of this new frontier with potentially 1,300 new habitable systems, as James Holden cautions, human beings are still human beings, and their problems don't disappear overnight just because they have new places to explore. There is the potential for this massive blood-soaked gold rush, and I just can't wait to see what happens next. In any case, let's dig into some of the details of what made this doubleheader so exciting. So with episode 12, the pace was definitely a little slower, but you really got the sense that the storytellers behind the show were really putting all the pieces on the chessboard and giving us all the information we needed to know about their competing agendas so that when all hell broke loose in episode 13, we wouldn't be confused about all the various pieces in play. What helps a lot is that pretty much every single character that we've been following is now aboard the Behemoth, including James Holden, who's imprisoned. The Martians have interrogated him. Ashford interrogates him. Ashford's completely convinced that James Holden is off his rocker. However, what James Holden tells him about the potential annihilation of our solar system is what fuels and drives a lot of Ashford's actions in the latter part of this doubleheader. But what Holden tries to communicate is that basically they're sitting in a graveyard, that the people who built this station and who built all the various rings, they are long gone. that they were exterminated by a threat far superior to them, that they basically were burning out solar systems, almost like trying to cauterize a wound, and they have the potential to cauterize yet another wound, the threat represented by humanity. But one of the beautiful parts of this episode is that we finally got to see our crew of the Rocinante more or less intact. Granted, they're only around each other very briefly before they scatter off to all the various missions. I always appreciate when we get the full lineup of all 4 characters, at least in the same room, however fleeting those seconds might be. And episode 12 really gives us a sense of just how dire the situation is. Drummer's facing potential paralysis due to the damage to her spinal cord in the previous episode. She's determined to still help and be useful, in spite of the fact that her doctor is ordering her to stay put, and she starts assembling these mech legs that will allow her to get around. Something I did not foresee was how much fun it was going to be seeing Amos and Anna interacting. I can't think of 2 characters who are less alike than Amos and Anna. They have conflicting ideas about what should be done with Clarissa, but they finally decide that an inhibitor to keep her from using her powers in a jail cell is the best possible option. But Amos is trying to convince Anna your mercy toward her will not be appreciated nor reciprocated. But Anna holds true to the idea that under these circumstances, that's when doing the right thing is the most important thing of all. And episode 12 does a really good job of establishing why Ashford makes such self-destructive decisions as the story progresses, because we see that they're out of synthetic blood, that people are in serious need of donations. More importantly, we see that there's absolutely no way to get a message for help outside the ring. And as far as he's concerned, this station, this nucleus at the middle of this bubble, that it is the aggressor, not human beings. And he keeps lashing out at what he doesn't understand. And he starts listening to the very foolhardy advice of some people around him of testing some bombs near the nucleus to see what might happen. In their ignorance, they believe that if they can disrupt the nucleus, that might actually allow them to relay some information through the ring. So once again, they are trying to do the right thing, but using bombs and weapons to fight something you don't understand, not necessarily the world's smartest idea. But we also see how Ashford is increasingly willing to sacrifice his own people or resort to violence to keep them in line. There's a problem where he realizes that supplies are going missing, and Diogo, who's supposed to be looking after those supplies, he's either stealing them or he's so incompetent that he's allowing things to be stolen. And Ashford basically says, anyone who's not doing their job, I will throw them out into space myself. But he is willing to make a deal with Naomi where if she's willing to repair some aspects of the ship, that he will allow her to see Holden. The big problem is they're about to lose power. And without power and without lights, obviously, both she and he and Holden, everybody dies. So Naomi lends a helping hand for a little while. And finally, Drummer, who's back on her feet with her mech support, takes Naomi down to see Holden. And we see that as Holden and Naomi are having their conversation about everything he learned inside the nucleus of the station, that Clarissa is listening in. And in spite of the fact that Clarissa utterly despises Holden, I mean, the whole reason she's here in the first place is to humiliate him, destroy his reputation, and murder him. But we can see that as she listens to him, his tone, his goals, his ambitions, everything he wants to achieve, you can see that it's having a positive impact on her. But it was hard to even notice the ending of episode 12 because it kind of seamlessly with the commercial went right into episode 13. But my assumption is that the end of episode 12 comes right when Ashford meets with the other captains and they decide that this station is a clear and present danger to the entire human race outside the ring, and they decide that they're going to use the laser aboard the behemoth instead of as a communication device. They're going to enhance its power, attack the ring, and cut off their solar system from the station so the station will never have the ability to interact with their home planets. Had this been a normal episode, that probably would have been a very jaw-dropping cliffhanger, but in the case of tonight, the best was yet to come because as interesting as episode 12 might have been, episode 13 really dialed things up. So the gist of episode 13 is that it's basically a very carefully orchestrated military coup. And while it doesn't necessarily have the scale and the body count and all the detail that the book Abaddon's Gate had, I have to say for a condensed, abbreviated version of the struggle, they did a pretty goddamn good job of adapting Abaddon's Gate. As much as I worry about them condensing all this material into only a handful of episodes, what it means is they can really only focus on the best parts, but also it means they don't have to pad things out with their own original material. And I hope that's an approach that they will continue to adapt moving forward, because I feel like the books are written like a TV show. It's not like they're unadaptable books. There are a lot of books out there where you look at it and you're like, how the hell could anybody ever possibly put this into screenplay form and try to shoot it? They're just written in a style that makes it an incredible hurdle to do so. The team behind The Expanse very clearly wrote these books with the screen in mind. But at the beginning of episode 13, Miller finally appears to Holden and tells him that the only solution for convincing the station that human beings are not a threat is that every single ship is going to have to simultaneously shut down their reactors. And that obviously is something that's going to be hard to convince everybody to do because everybody's scared, everybody's hurt, and if you shut down these reactors, it might even worsen the situation for people who are already hurt and injured. Nonetheless, starting with Naomi and Holden, and then with the addition of Drummer and Anna and Amos and Alex, they slowly but surely start getting some people over onto their side. Most importantly is getting Monica to team up with them so that they can broadcast all the information to all the ships. And before the coup really gets underway, Holden had this one great line where he said, "No plan survives contact with the enemy." It reminds me a little bit of mixed martial arts where they talk about how fighters have game plans when they go in, like they have a strategy in mind to try to defeat their opponent. However, the first time someone hits you in the face, usually your game plan just flies out the window. But their goal is to shut down the behemoth by force if necessary and convince all the other ships to do so. And of course, as Ashford and the Martians start to get wind of this plan, they mount their own resistance. But as Monica's getting prepared to do her broadcast with Anna, there is a really interesting conversation between Anna and Amos. Once again, they were really the hidden gem of these two episodes. And it's Anna who really clearly articulates how everybody involved in the struggle really truly believes they are doing the right thing, and that if human beings are ever going to survive this mess, as well as the future problems they're going to face as a species, they have to find a way to get past the hate. It'd be interesting to see how people would react to Anna if we were to turn her loose on Twitter today, because I feel like a lot of the lessons of these two episodes are probably lost on the majority of the bickering voices in social media. But a lot of the main characters at least do try talking things out before gunfire is exchanged. There's a great debate between Ashford, Drummer, and Naomi. Once Holden realizes that Ashford's plan is to eliminate the ring, Holden knows with absolute certainty that such an action will result in the extermination of the entire human species. But it's a classic example of a situation where no matter how much information you provide to somebody, no matter how many facts you provide to them, it's almost impossible to change someone's mind. I don't know if I've ever changed anybody's mind about anything ever. The best you can do is either try to convince somebody by leading by example, or tell them a story that might help them infer the conclusion that you're trying to lead them to. But most human beings are very stubborn, and if you shove facts down their throat, even if they're glaringly obvious, people tend to dig in their heels and push back. And as we see, Ashford's willing to execute somebody on the spot when he even tries to suggest that they should follow Holden's plan of shutting down all the reactors. But the big curveball of this episode is that Ashford's in such desperate need of people with engineering experience, they allow Clarissa to leave her jail cell and come up to the command center in order to try to lend a helping hand. Initially, she still has her inhibitor on, but when she explains to Ashford she's having trouble concentrating as a result, he removes it, which ultimately, at the end of the episode, proves to be Ashford's undoing, but luckily works out in the end for pretty much everybody else. But as Anna and Monica are doing their broadcast, we get this really great face-off between some of the Martian Marines going up against Amos and Alex. And as Bobby's ordering them to stand down, Alex is like, "Bobby?" And she's like, "Alex?" And they're like, "Oh, shit." Because they realize, obviously, not only are they fellow Martians, but they're very good friends. And as they're trying to talk it out, Bobby's team, who's been pushing back against her leadership the last few episodes, they finally betray her and try to take over the situation. And as a result, Bobby, Alex, and Amos end up working as a team. Bobby takes out one. Amos puts a bullet through another one's head. Sadly, Bobby takes one in the gut, but luckily she survives, but she goes down. But probably the most cinematic and visually stunning sequences of the entire episode deal with Naomi and Holden and Drummer as they're being pursued by Diogo and a few other belters in the Martian armor. There's this really killer shot of Diogo running down the length of the behemoth toward them. He's just hauling ass. Those suits of armor are just so damn cool. And there's this great battle scene as they're being pursued up this elevator shaft. And the scene that nearly made me start bawling, I just got really moved by it, was when Drummer realizes that she's kind of dead weight, she's slowing them down, but that if she were to hang back, she could potentially stop Diogo. And as she stops in this little alcove and is preparing to sacrifice herself with some grenades, I was just getting chills watching this. Luckily, Naomi's able to send an elevator down, which takes Diogo out. But as this is all unfolding, we see that the other ships are doing what they're supposed to do. They're all powering down their reactors. The only ship left is the Behemoth, and Holden, unarmed with Naomi, tries to talk sense into Ashford in front of a bunch of armed guards. And finally, it's Clarissa, the most unlikely person imaginable, who is persuaded by Holden's words. She does a little trick with her mouth and uses her enhancements. She goes into battle. She takes people out. She takes a bullet in the process, but she does manage to power down the Behemoth. And from that point on, things start to move very quickly. We get some great voiceover by Holden. We see yet another one of those naked Holden visions. But as a result of this gesture of every single ship powering down, the station responds accordingly and not only powers back up all the ships, but it also slowly but surely starts unlocking all the gateways that are in this station. And as Holden says at the end of the episode, these stations open up to 1,300 habitable systems. Holden's not 100% convinced that Miller's been completely forthcoming and honest with him about all the details of his own agenda. Obviously, Miller is no longer Miller. Miller is an extension of the protomolecule, which obviously is the technology of this alien race that created the station. But Holden realizes there's more at stake than just opening up these gates. There's very clearly something that this plan or that this technology wants human beings to do. And in that, I have not finished book 4 and I haven't read anything beyond that. This is not a spoiler, but my prediction is that the technology is almost using human beings as bait to see if this ancient threat from millions and or billions of years ago, which originally took this entire civilization out, to test and see if they're still out there. Because obviously a lot of these gates were shut down as a way of keeping that alien threat from having access to all these other systems. And frankly, that mystery is kind of driving my imagination wild. What drew me into this show initially was my fascination with the protomolecule. I found it absolutely terrifying, just absolutely horrifying. While its depiction in the book and in the show have been a little different, that was the bait that drew me in. And now the prospect of seeing a threat that's far more menacing and far more threatening, that's just got me absolutely salivating about what might be coming toward us in the future. But I hope everybody out there had as much fun with this season finale as I did. And I should acknowledge the reason I got into The Expanse in the first place about a year and a half ago was because of this YouTube channel when people were leaving comments suggesting that I check it out. So it's through this channel that I got exposed to these books and these shows, but also got to connect with the larger Expanse community. So I absolutely love the Expanse community. As I acknowledged earlier, the Expanse community seems to read a lot of books and seems to know a lot of math and science. It makes them a very interesting community to interact with. But in the spirit of the recommendation that I received on this channel that got me into the show in the first place, at this point, I would love recommendations moving forward, because obviously in this channel, I'm going to be covering other movies and other shows going into the future. Right now, off the top of my head, the only big sci-fi show I can think of is Night Flyers, which I think starts in September on Sci-Fi. It's based on a short story by George R.R. Martin. I'll definitely be sinking my teeth into that. But apart from some of the big movies coming out this summer, any recommendations people have for really cool shows to follow on this channel, definitely send those suggestions my way. So I can't thank you enough for all the support on this channel throughout this entire Season 3. If you want more content of a similar nature, you can always check out my podcast, Wrong Reel, on iTunes. It's more of a movie podcast than a TV podcast, but it's long-form interviews and conversations about movies, old and new. But hopefully, we'll be getting some news from Amazon in the near future about when we might expect Season 4, and I look forward to reconnecting with the Expanse community at the appropriate time. So thank you so much for watching my channel. If you could give me a subscribe, I would really appreciate it. If you want to talk more, you can hunt me down on Twitter @Colbrax, or just leave a comment in the comments below. But until next time, onwards and upwards.